Hello and welcome to Skyline's second episode tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dhriti Yatri. Every single day, the world changes in ways that can directly affect your lives. A decision taken in Washington, it can impact fuel prices in India. A military deployment in West Asia, it can shake global stock market. A diplomatic meeting behind closed doors, it can decide whether the world moves towards peace or towards another conflict. And that is why on Skyline, we don't just tell you what happened, we explain why it matters. So, let's begin with the story that has changed the geopolitical conversation overnight. For weeks, the world watched tension between the US and Iran rise to dangerous level. Every headline suggested that a major military confrontation was becoming more likely. Fighter jets were on standby. Naval forces had moved into a strategic position. Military planners had reportedly prepared target lists. Around the globe, markets were nervous because everybody knew that if the whole conflict expanded, the consequences, it could not remain limited to West Asia. And just when many believed that military action was inevitable, everything changed. According to President Donald Trump, the United States had prepared what he described as the largest planned military strike against Iran since the Second World War. It wasn't expected to be a limited operation, though. Reports suggested that Iranian nuclear infrastructure and nuclear-related targets were among the locations being considered. In other words, this had the potential to become one of the biggest military campaigns in the modern American history. But yes, before those plans become reality, Washington received urgent messages from some of its closest partners in the Gulf. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. These three nations reportedly warned that another major war in that particular region, it would not remain confined to Iran. They feared retaliatory attacks on Gulf oil facilities, disruption to commercial shipping, threats to civilian airspace, and a fresh energy crisis that could send oil prices soaring across the globe. Well, these concerns centered around one of the most strategically important waterways on the planet Earth. We are talking about the Strait of Hormuz here. This narrow stretch of water, it carries nearly 1/5 of the global oil supply. Every day, millions of barrels of crude oil pass through this particular route. So if shipping is interrupted over here, the impact felt everywhere, from petrol stations in Asia to inflation in Europe and North America. And that is why this wasn't simply about missiles or military strategy. It was about global economy, it was about energy security, and it was about whether families around the globe would end up paying more for fuel, transport, and even everyday essentials. Well, following diplomatic outreach from the Gulf leaders, President Trump, he announced the planned military action had been paused to give negotiations another kind of chance here. Well, the response from financial markets was immediate. Oil prices eased, shipping concern reduced, global investors, they were eased, and they showed a sign of relief as well. But experts say that this should not be mistaken for the end of the crisis. American forces continue to remain on high alert. Military assets are still positioned across the region. Diplomatic talks are continuing, but officials have also made it clear that if negotiations collapse, military options remain on the table. So while the world may have stepped back from the edge, for now the whole situation remains extremely fragile. Sometimes the biggest global stories, they are not about wars that begin. They are about the wars that almost happened. And just this particular week, the world may have witnessed exactly that kind of situation. But yes, while diplomacy may have prevented one immediate crisis, another challenge is quietly worrying the Pentagon. Because winning a war does not only depend on soldiers, it also depends on whether you have enough missiles left to fight it. For years, the United States has been seen as one of the world's strongest military powers. Its advanced missile defense systems, it has protected American troops, defended allies, acted as a powerful deterrent against enemy attacks. But now a new assessment, is raising an uncomfortable question. What happens when even the world's most powerful military starts running short of weapons that is designed to protect it? That's right, a recent assessment by the Center for Strategic and International Studies suggested that months of defending US bases, supporting Israel, and assisting Gulf allies have significantly reduced America's stockpile of Patriot and THAAD missile interceptors. These are not ordinary missiles. They are some of the most advanced air defense systems in the world, built to intercept ballistic missiles before they reach their target. Well, think about the pressure these systems have faced over the past several months, from protecting military bases across West Asia to supporting allies facing repeated missile attacks. These interceptors have been used continuously now. Every successful interception may save lives, but it also reduces the available inventory. And unlike ammunition, these sophisticated systems cannot be replaced overnight. In the meantime, military analysts, they say that this shortage is not just about one region. If missile stockpile continue to decline, the US may have to make difficult strategic choices. Should it prioritize protecting its forces in West Asia, continue military assistance to Ukraine, or preserve enough interceptors for any future crisis involving China in the Indo-Pacific? These are no longer theoretical questions. They are becoming real planning challenges inside the Pentagon today. Recognizing the growing concern, the US government has already approved billions of dollars to expand the production of Patriot and THAAD interceptor. Defense manufacturers, they are being asked to increase the output as quickly as possible. But modern missile systems are highly complex. They require specialized components, advanced technology, and long manufacturing timeline. Even with emergency funding, rebuilding these inventories, they will take time. This particular story, it also reminds us of an important reality of modern warfare. Wars are no longer won only by size of an army. They are won by supply chain. They are won by industrial production, and they are won by the ability to replace equipment faster than it is used on the battlefield. So, while America continues to project military strength around the globe, behind the scene it is also confronting a challenge that is faced by every nation involved in a prolonged conflict. How to ensure that its defensive shield that remains enough strong for the next crisis now. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, military strength is one way countries project global influence. Diplomacy is another. But now the United States is making a move that could reshape its diplomatic presence across the globe. Embassies and consulates are often called the front doors of the country, right? They issue visas, assist citizens overseas, strengthen the diplomatic ties, and help build economic partnership. And that's why governments usually expand their diplomatic presence and not reduce it. But guess what? The United States is now moving in the opposite direction. According to reports, the US State Department has informed Congress about plans to close 5 diplomatic missions located in Canada, Japan, Indonesia, Cameroon, and Grenada. While these closures are part of a broader reconstructing effort under President Donald Trump's America First agenda, they also signal a significant shift in how Washington wants to engage with the rest of the world. This isn't because of a war or an emergency evacuation. Instead, officials say that this particular decision is linked to efforts to streamline overseas operations and reduce administrative costs. Simple words, the administration believes that America can maintain its global interest with a leaner diplomatic network. Supporters of the move, they argue that modern diplomacy is changing now. Many government services have become digital. Communication between countries, it is faster than ever before, and resources should be concentrated where they are needed the most. Now, from this particular perspective, closing selected missions is presented as a step towards greater efficiency rather than reduced global influence. However, critics are everywhere. Critics see the decision very differently. They argue that diplomacy is built on relationships, local engagement, and physical presence. Every embassy and consulate represents a country's commitment to its partners. When missions closes, they say opportunities for dialogue, cultural exchange, and economic cooperation can also diminish. Some foreign policy experts, they believe that reducing America's diplomatic footprint, it could create space for other global players, particularly China, to strengthen their own interest in regions where Washington is scaling back. Well, this particular debate, it goes far beyond 5 buildings. It raises a much larger question about America's role in the entire world. Should global leadership rely primarily on military power and economic strength? Or does diplomacy that remains one of the most effective tools in a nation that a nation possesses? Well, the answer may shape American foreign policy for years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, for now, one thing is definitely certain, that Washington is redefining not only how it responds to international crisis, but also how it chooses to maintain its presence across the globe. And yes, while the United States is reshaping its global strategy, another major power is quietly trying to reshape the aviation industry. And in our next story, we will look at how Russia is attempting to challenge two of the biggest names in commercial aviation despite years of Western sanction. For decades, two names have dominated global aviation industry: Boeing and Airbus. Whether you board a flight in New York, London, Dubai, Delhi or Singapore, chances are that you're flying on an aircraft built by one of these companies. Together, they have shaped commercial aviation for decades. But now, Russia wants to change that. Of course, despite years of Western sanctions and restrictions on tech export, Moscow is now moving ahead with an ambitious plan to build a completely domestic passenger aircraft industry. At the center of that effort is MC-21, an aircraft Russia hopes can eventually compete with Boeing's 737 and Airbus's A320 family. This is much more than just another airplane. For Russia, it is a matter of national strategy. Since the Ukraine war began, Western sanctions have made it increasingly difficult for Russian airlines to access aircraft parts, maintenance support and new deliveries from Boeing and Airbus. That forced Moscow to ask a difficult question: what happens if your aviation sector depends on companies that are no longer willing or able to do business with you? Answer is simple: build your own. The MC-29, it has completed another important stage of testing using Russian-made system and components. Engineers have been working to replace imported technology with domestically produced alternative. From engines to onboard equipments, it's a massive engineering challenge, by the way, because modern passenger aircraft, they are containing thousands of highly specialized parts that usually come from suppliers spread across the world. But building an aircraft, it is only half the battle. Winning the trust of airlines is much harder, right? Commercial airlines don't simply buy airplanes because they are new. They look at the safety record. They look at fuel efficiency, maintenance costs, spare parts availability, and years of operational data before making billion-dollar decisions. And that is why Boeing and Airbus, these two companies, have spent decades building confidence with airlines across the globe. Russia now has to do the same, by the way. Even if the MC-21, it performs well technically, convincing international customers to choose it over these two established global giants, it will take years for them. Still, the project tells us something important here. Ladies and gentlemen, sanctions may slow technical progress, but they can also push countries to become more self-reliant. In our Prime Minister's word, Atmanirbhar. Well, whether Russia succeeds or not, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The global aviation industry is entering a new era, one where competition is no longer driven only by business. It is also changing by geopolitics. And yes, while Russia is trying to build the next generation of passenger aircraft, Boeing has been trying just to get one of its own planes back into skies. And after years of delays, it has finally received the news it was waiting for. For Boeing, the last few years, it has been some of the most difficult in the company's history. From safety concerns and certification delays to production challenges and growing public scrutiny, the American aviation giant has faced one setback. Rather, not one after another. And now, after years of waiting, Boeing has finally received a major breakthrough. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, has officially certified the Boeing 737 MAX 7. For Boeing, this isn't just another regulatory approval. It is a crucial step towards rebuilding confidence in one of the most important aircraft families. The MAX 7 is the smallest member of the 737 MAX series, and it is designed primarily for short and medium haul routes. Airlines have been waiting for this certification because it allows them to modernize their fleet with more fuel-efficient aircraft while reducing operating cost. In fact, the approval is also bringing some sort of relief to the airlines that placed orders years ago and have been waiting for deliveries since then. But while this is undoubtedly a positive news for Boeing, the company's challenges are far from over. Certification is only one part of the journey. Boeing must now increase production, deliver aircraft on a schedule, and perhaps most importantly, rebuild public trust. After previous safety controversies, passengers around the globe become much more aware of aircraft model and airline safety standards. Every announcement involving Boeing, it is now receiving global attention. That means every aircraft leaving the factory will be watched more closely than ever before. The company also continues to face intense competition from Airbus, which has strengthened its position in several markets during Boeing's difficult period. And at the very same time, airlines are dealing with rising passenger demand, aircraft shortages, and supply chain disruption that continue to affect deliveries across the industries. Well, in many ways, the FAA's decision, it makes the end of one chapter, but it does not end the Boeing's recovery. The company still has a long journey ahead because in aviation, earning certification is important, but earning passenger confidence, it is even more valuable. And for Boeing, that may be the biggest challenges still waiting on the horizon. Now, from challenges in the skies, we move to the crisis unfolding on the ground. Because while airlines are preparing for the future, thousands of firefighters are battling on the fastest growing natural disasters in the United States. When people think of natural disasters in the US, hurricanes often come to the mind. Others think of earthquake in California or tornado across the West. But this week, another crisis is unfolding in the Pacific Northwest, where massive wildfires are once again testing emergency services and forcing communities to leave their homes. Washington state is battling multiple fast-moving wildfires that have already burned thousands of acres of land. Firefighters are working around the clock, but strong wind, extremely dry condition, and soaring temperatures are making their job even more difficult. Every change in the wild, it is creating new challenges, allowing flames to spread rapidly across forest and open land. Well, for the families living in the affected areas, life has changed overnight. People are asked to leave their homes with only the essentials. Emergency shelters have been opened for displaced residents, while firefighters, they continue trying to stop the flames before they reach more neighborhoods and critical infrastructure. These fires are much more about damaged forests. Wildfires can also affect air quality over hundreds of kilometers. Thick smoke has spread across several areas, leading health officials to warn children, elderly, and people with breathing problems to remain indoors whenever it is possible. Even community living far from the fire zone can experience dangerous level of air pollution. Climate experts say that these incidents are becoming more frequent because longer period of heat and dry weather, it creates the perfect condition for wildfire to spread rapidly. Once the fire starts, strong winds can carry the burning fire over long distances, allowing entirely new fires to ignite within minutes. The financial impact is equally significant. Wildfire destroy homes, businesses, farms, roads, electricity. Insurance claims rise into billions of dollars, rebuilding takes years, and local economies often struggle long after the flames have been extinguished. Firefighters continue risking their lives every single day to protect whom? Communities, often working in extremely dangerous conditions with little rest here. Their efforts have prevented even greater destruction, by the way, but officials warn that the whole situation that remains unpredictable. Well, this disaster is another reminder that some of the biggest challenges facing the world today, it is not political, they are environmental. They are happening because of climate change. And as climate patterns continue changing, governments everywhere may need to rethink how to prevent these disasters that are becoming larger, more expensive and more frequent every single year. Well, every time you tap your card at a supermarket, transfer money through your banking account or app, or make an online payment, a silent battle takes place in the background. It's a race between banks trying to stop fraud and cyber criminals trying to stay one step ahead. And yes, most of us never see the battle. We simply expect our banks to detect suspicious transactions, block the fake payment, and keep our money safe. But now, one of the biggest names in global payment is making a move that could completely reshape that invisible security network. Ladies and gentlemen, Visa has announced a massive $2.4 billion deal to acquire fraud detection company BioCatch. At first glance, it may look like just another corporate acquisition. But experts believe that this deal could have far-reaching consequences for banks, payment companies, and millions of customers around the globe. But here's the reason. BioCatch is one of the world's leading fraud detection companies. Instead of only checking passwords or OTPs, its technology studies people naturally use their devices. It looks at behavioral pattern. How somebody types, how they move a mouse, how they hold a smartphone or interact with a banking app. If something suddenly feels unusual, the system can flag a transaction as potentially fraudulent before money disappears from the account. Today, some of America's biggest banks already rely on this particular technology. That means Visa is not simply buying another software company. It's acquiring a platform that already sits deep inside the fraud prevention system of major financial institutions. And that's exactly why the deal is attracting so much attention. Some banking experts believe that combining Visa's global payment network with BioCatch's advanced fraud detection capabilities could make financial system faster, smarter, and more secure. Banks could potentially identify scams more quickly, reduce fraud losses, and improve protection for millions of customers. But not everybody is celebrating though. Some analysts believe that the deal also could change the balance of power between banks and their technology providers. Today, many banks negotiate separately with payment, network, and fraud detection company. Now, if both services increasingly come under the same corporate umbrella, banks may have fewer independent vendors to choose from during future negotiations. As financial analyst Eric Grover, he points out that bundled service can certainly make operations more efficient. While managing one integrated provider may simplify technology and reduce administrative work, but convenience often comes with trade-off. The more dependent consumers become on a single provider, the less bargaining power they may have when contracts come up for renewal. There's another important point. The transaction is still expected to close by March 2027. Until then, regulatory approvals and legal reviews remain part of the process. Questions also continue around how financial institutions will share the fraud information and customer protection data under evolving regulatory framework. So while this acquisition promises stronger fraud protection, it also raises broader question about competition, market concentration, and the future relationship between banks and payment network. But for the customers, the biggest hope, it is very, very simple. Safer banking, faster fraud detection, and better protection against increasingly sophisticated cyber crimes. And for the banking industry, this story is much more than cyber security. It is also about controlling next generation of digital finance. And with that, we come to the end of today's edition of Skyline. From global conflicts and military strategy to aviation, tech, climate disaster, and now the future of digital banking. Today's story reminds us that the world is changing at an incredible pace. Every headline may seem different, but together they tell you one larger story. A world where geopolitics, business, tech, and our everyday lives are becoming more connected than ever before. And that's why on Skyline, our goal is not to bring you the news, but to explain the story behind the headline and why it matters to you. I'm Dhriti Athwi, this was Skyline, and I'll see you in the next episode.